Forget about your lake house. My husband's parents live there now. Our daughter's voice was calm and cold. I'm Olivia, 60 years old, married to Ron for nearly 4 decades. We've built our life together from nothing. No family fortune, no safety net. Just years of hard work, careful saving, and an unshakable partnership. Ron worked long hours in construction, and I managed the household while holding part-time jobs. Together, we raised our daughter, Emily. From the moment she was born, we poured everything into her. Time, love, money, every ounce of energy we had. We taught her the value of working for what you want and gave her more than we ever had growing up. Our greatest shared treasure is our lake house. We bought the land 30 years ago, slowly building it into a home with our own hands. Every plank, every nail, every coat of paint carries a piece of us. It's where Emily spent her childhood summers, learning to swim, roasting marshmallows, falling asleep on the couch after long days on the water. We imagined one day she'd bring her own family there, and we'd watch the next generation grow up in a place filled with love. By contrast, Emily's in-laws have always had money, a lot of it. They live in a large city home, drive new cars, take long vacations every year. If they wanted a lakeside property, they could buy one tomorrow without even feeling the cost. But instead of doing that, they've been handed ours, without so much as lifting a finger to earn it. We had been talking about this weekend for months. The lake house was our sanctuary, the place we could rest after decades of hard work. Now it felt like someone had ripped it out of our hands. Ron had only called to tell her we'd be picking up the keys, something we'd done countless times before. Instead, her words hit like a slap. They live there now. Forget it. Emily's voice was calm but cold. Ron froze mid-step, and I slowly set down the mug I'd been holding before I dropped it. She didn't sound rushed or apologetic, just sure of herself, like this was already decided and there was nothing we could say to change it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. My in-laws are staying there now. It's better this way. Better for who? She didn't ask if we minded. She didn't explain why. She didn't even acknowledge what she was taking from us. Just short final statements, each one shutting us out a little more. Ron asked her why. Her voice slowed, as if we were too stubborn to grasp something obvious. It's done. They're already there. You can't change it. With each word, my resentment grew. No apology, no hesitation, not even the courtesy of a polite excuse. And with every clipped sentence, my mind filled with memories. Birthdays we paid for when she couldn't. Tuition we covered without hesitation. The late-night calls for just a little help. The weekends we dropped everything to move furniture, paint walls, fix plumbing, or babysit. We never kept score. We never asked for repayment. We gave her everything we could. And this was what we got. She said it wasn't personal. She said it would be easier this way. I hated that phrase. Easier for her meant harder for us. Easier for her meant she could erase us from the place we loved most and pretend it didn't matter. Ron didn't shout when he ended the call. He set the phone on the table with deliberate care. His silence weighed more than anger. She gave them our house, he said, almost to himself. My throat tightened. I couldn't bring myself to speak. That night, I lay awake replaying every moment of that conversation. Her steady voice, the lack of hesitation, the absence of care. Forget it. As if we were being unreasonable for wanting to keep the one place that had always been ours. I imagined her in-laws, people who never spent a single day fixing a leak or repairing a roof, lounging on our deck, looking out over our water, feeling entitled to something they had no part in building. It wasn't just about the house, it was about the years of sacrifice, the choices we made to put her needs first. We never measured those sacrifices, but now I saw that she had, and in her calculation, we no longer counted. The next morning, the light coming in through the curtains felt sharp instead of soft. Ron and I were both at the kitchen table, hands wrapped loosely around our coffee mugs, not drinking. The silence between us wasn't comfortable. It was loaded, heavy, almost physical. We didn't turn on the radio or glance at the paper. Neither of us wanted to break the stillness because speaking would make it all real again. I kept replaying Emily's voice in my head, the even tone, the steady pace. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't slipped and said something in anger she didn't mean. Every word had been deliberate. Each one had been planted like a stake, marking the ground she'd claimed. She knew exactly what she was doing. As I stared at my coffee, my mind drifted to all the summers and weekends we had poured into that house. I remembered the deck, the one Ron and I rebuilt ourselves. We'd spent days pulling up warped boards, carrying lumber from the truck to the lakefront, measuring, sawing, hammering. The sweat had soaked through our shirts. My arms had ached for days afterward. We did it because we wanted the house to be perfect for our family. Then the roof. We'd saved for 2 years to replace it after a string of storms left shingles scattered across the yard. Overtime shifts, extra side jobs, anything to get it done. Emily knew all of that. She'd been old enough to see the exhaustion in our faces when we came home from work, still needing to scrape paint or seal the deck. And yet, she acted as if the house had no history, as if it were just a building she could hand over to people who'd never invested a single hour in it. When she said, "It's better this way," my chest had tightened. Better for whom? Her in-laws, who already had more than enough? People who could buy their own lakeside place without even thinking about the cost? They didn't need our home. They wanted it because it was there, because she made it available. Ron finally spoke. "She's been pulling away for a while," he said, his voice low. "We didn't see it." He was right. I'd noticed the missed holidays, the last-minute changes to family dinners, the excuses about how busy they were. I told myself it was life, that she had her own family now. But it hadn't been just busyness. It had been a slow, careful shifting away from us. Even now, some part of me wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that she didn't realize the depth of what she'd done, that she'd call back, apologize, tell us it had been a mistake. But in my heart, I knew she wouldn't. This wasn't a thoughtless decision. It was intentional. This was about more than the lake house. It was about trust. We had trusted her to protect the things we held dear, not just the property, but the bond we shared. She'd broken that trust easily, without a flicker of hesitation. I looked at Ron. His coffee was cold now, untouched. "We gave her everything," I said quietly. "Every single time she needed us, we showed up. We never said no." He met my eyes. And she's always known that. That was the sting that lingered. She knew our love, our loyalty, and she counted on it. She assumed it would keep us silent. She assumed we'd swallow this the way we'd swallowed every other small hurt over the years. But something in me was shifting. Was the reflex to defend her, to smooth things over, to give her the benefit of the doubt. It was fading. Not gone, not yet, but fading. I stood and walked to the sink, pouring my coffee down the drain. "We need to think," I told Ron. "Really think. Because if we let this pass, it won't be the last time." He didn't argue. And in the quiet that followed, I knew we were both thinking the same thing. This was the day something changed between us and our daughter, and there was no going back. By late afternoon, the air in the house felt thick. Ron and I had been pacing in quiet loops. He'd step outside for air. I'd drift into the living room. Then we'd switch places without a word. It wasn't the stillness of people waiting. It was the restless energy of people deciding what comes next. Emily's voice from the day before was still in my ears. The way she said, "It's done," as though that was the end of the matter. No discussion, no hesitation, just finality delivered like a verdict. She hadn't asked us, hadn't left space for our feelings. She decided, and in her mind, that was all there was to it. Resentment had moved from my chest into my limbs, pushing me to move, to act. Every time I pictured her in-laws unpacking in our bedroom, I felt my jaw clench. They'd be opening the drawers we had built, using the dishes I had chosen, sitting in the chairs we'd saved to buy. They had done nothing to earn it, yet there they were, by her invitation. Ron stepped back inside and sat across from me. "We have to do something," he said, no question in his voice. He was right. In the past, we might have let it slide, told ourselves it wasn't worth the fight, but this wasn't a minor slight. This was a line crossed so plainly that to ignore it would be to invite it to happen again. In the middle of our conversation, an old memory slammed into me. I was 19 again, standing in my father's driveway with a single suitcase. He'd said, "It's better this way," in a voice eerily like Emily's. Back then I had nothing. No home, no savings, no one to fall back on. I'd promised myself that if I ever had a child, they would never feel that same sting of rejection. And I kept that promise. Until now, when I realized I was the one being pushed out. It was as if all my years of sacrifice had been erased. I had paid for everything Emily needed, made sure she always had a home, covered her expenses when she was struggling. I thought I was protecting her from the coldness I'd known. But here I was, feeling it again, this time from her. Ron and I began piecing together the smaller moments that had led here. The Christmas dinner she canceled at the last minute because it would be easier to just spend the day with them. The school events where her in-laws were always present, but our invitations never seemed to arrive. The vacations planned without so much as a mention to us. One memory after another clicked into place, forming a pattern we had been avoiding. It was clear now. This wasn't about the lake house alone. It was about being slowly pushed aside. And if we didn't hold our ground now, we might as well step aside entirely. Ron's voice was steady when he said, "We need a plan." The moment he spoke, something in me shifted. The shock I'd been living in began to drain away, replaced by a calm determination. For the first time since her call, I wasn't just hurt. I was ready. Ready to remind Emily and her in-laws that we weren't going anywhere. We checked the property documents. Everything was still in our names. No signatures, no transfers. That small fact gave me an anchor. Then came the question of who we might place in the house to make a statement. We considered friends, maybe a retired couple we knew who would appreciate a weekend by the lake. We thought about renting it to vacationers through a short-term site, but both options felt too soft, too easily ignored. We needed someone who would make it unmistakably clear. This was our house, and we controlled who set foot inside. That's when Ron mentioned an old acquaintance from his construction days who was part of a well-known motorcycle club, the Night Wolves. They were known in the area, a tight-knit group who looked out for each other. Not a gang, but men and women with a strong presence, the kind of people who didn't blend quietly into the background. If they were at the lake house, there would be no mistaking that it was occupied. We reached out discreetly. To our surprise, they were looking for a weekend spot to gather, ride, and relax. It was perfect timing. They were more than willing to sign a proper short-term lease, everything by the book, all perfectly legal. In return, they'd have a place to stay, and we'd have the most visible reminder possible that the lake house was not up for casual takeover. It was clean, it was lawful, and it would send the message without us having to raise our voices. As the plan solidified, I realized the hurt hadn't disappeared, but it was now fuel. I could think clearly. I could breathe again. That evening, while Ron spoke with the realtor to finalize the arrangements, I sat at the kitchen table, steady for the first time in days. I didn't know every detail of how this would play out, but I knew one thing. We were done waiting for Emily to come to her senses. We were going to act, and she wasn't going to see it coming. By the time Saturday came, I could feel the tension in my bones. The drive to the lake was quiet, each turn of the tires carrying us closer to the moment I'd been replaying in my head all week. This was not going to be a peaceful day by the water. This was about standing our ground. We arrived early, the morning sun glittering on the ripples of the lake, but I barely noticed the beauty. My focus was on the plan. We had coordinated it perfectly. The night wolves arrived shortly after us, a disciplined line of chrome and leather, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. They parked in a neat row at the side of the driveway. The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with steady eyes, stepped forward. We reviewed the short-term lease together, checking every signature, every date. It was all there, legal, unshakable. His words were steady. "We'll take it from here. No one will question who belongs here." But as we turned to the driveway, my breath caught. Emily's in-laws' SUV was already there. Curtains twitched in the living room window. Shadows moved across the glass. They hadn't just arrived. They had made themselves at home. The night wolves dismounted in unison, boots crunching on the gravel. Their leader walked to the porch, his knock firm. The door swung open to reveal Emily's husband, his face morphing from surprise to hostility in an instant. "What is this?" he demanded. "You're in our rental," the leader said calmly, raising the lease. "You need to leave." Emily's voice shot from somewhere inside, sharp and defensive. "This is our family's house. You can't just throw us out." "It's not yours to take," the leader replied without raising his voice. Her father-in-law appeared, chest out, voice dripping with authority. "We're not going anywhere. Call the police if you think you can make us." The leader didn't flinch. We already did. Minutes later, patrol cars rolled up. The officers entered the house, speaking in low, controlled tones. They asked for proof of ownership or a lease. Emily's in-laws had nothing. No documents, no permission, nothing to support their claim. The bikers handed over their signed lease, and I saw the shift in the officer's posture. It was all they needed. "You need to leave immediately," the officer said firmly. Emily's reply was instant, loud. "We're not leaving. This is ridiculous." "Ma'am," the officer said, voice now clipped, "you are trespassing. Step outside." They stood frozen, and then the tone changed completely. "Hands where I can see them. Now." The officer's voice cracked through the air. Emily gasped. Her husband swore. Her father-in-law barked about family rights as the officers moved in. "Face down. Now." The crunch of gravel under their bodies was sharp. The metallic click of handcuffs followed in quick succession. Emily's head twisted, eyes scanning frantically. "You're doing this to your own daughter," she yelled. Ron's phone buzzed against my leg. I didn't answer. We stayed silent. Emily's mother-in-law spat out accusations of a setup. Her husband glared at the bikers like he could burn a hole through them. Emily's voice broke, rising again. "You'll regret this." One by one, they were lifted to their feet and walked to the patrol cars. The doors shut behind them with a final echoing thud. The engines turned, carrying them toward the station where, as we later learned, they were booked for unlawful entry and placed in a holding cell. We didn't move from our place down the road. We didn't have to. The paperwork, the law, and the truth were louder than anything we could have said. When the police were gone, the night wolves reclaimed the porch. Their conversation and laughter rolled easily across the water. The house was ours again, quiet, untouched, and indisputably ours. We hadn't raised our voices once. We hadn't let anger run the show. We'd simply prepared, acted, and let the truth do the work. And in that moment, I knew this was the most satisfying victory we could have hoped for. But the most unexpected thing happened a week later. It had been a week since the scene at the lake house, and the silence between Emily and us had taken on a life of its own. I was in the kitchen, rinsing coffee cups, when my phone lit up with a number I could recognize without even looking. I let it ring, and then ring again. On the third call, Ron looked up from his chair, meeting my eyes. We didn't have to speak. We'd already agreed. Our silence was our answer. The ringing stopped. Then came a voice message. Emily's tone was tight, shaking slightly. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. You've humiliated us." Her choice of words hit me harder than the message itself. United States, not her, not them. United States. As though we were co-victims of some cruel twist of fate, She still couldn't, or wouldn't, see what she had done. Not a word about trespassing, not a hint of acknowledgement that she had removed us from our own home without so much as a conversation. Not one syllable of apology. It brought back every moment over the years when I'd stepped in for her, when we paid her tuition so she wouldn't have to drop out, when we bought her first car because she needed a way to get to work, when I canceled my own plans to watch her children so she could attend events. Every one of those choices had been made in love, without hesitation, and now here she was, angry because she had been reminded that she was not above the rules. That afternoon, I made the mistake of checking social media. There it was, her public statement, vague but clearly aimed. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to stand by you are the first to turn their back. Underneath, the comments poured in. Friends, distant relatives, old acquaintances, offering sympathy and encouragement. None of them knew the truth. I hovered over the reply box more than once. I could have defended myself. I could have laid out every detail, but I didn't. Sometimes the most powerful statement is made in silence. Her in-laws made their own attempts. One evening, Ron's phone lit up with her father-in-law's number. His voice filled our voicemail, long, heated, and dripping with accusation. He called us vindictive, told us we were tearing the family apart, warned us we were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I stopped the playback before Ron heard it all. There was no need to let his words into our home. A few days later, a letter arrived. Not an apology, not even a gesture toward one, just a demand, thinly disguised as a request to let bygones be bygones and restore their access to the lake house. The tone was almost businesslike, as though we were negotiating a contract rather than repairing a relationship. I slipped the letter back into its envelope and placed it in the drawer without responding. The resentment I carried now was different from the sharp anger of that first day. It had cooled into something quieter, but deeper. In quiet moments, I could still hear her voice from that confrontation. "This is our family's house. You can't just throw us out." I remembered the way she emphasized family, as if the word itself were a lever she could use to pry open my resolve. It was the tone of someone who believed love meant compliance. Ron and I began to reclaim our time at the lake. The night wolves had kept their word. The place was exactly as we had left it. Sometimes, in the soft glow of evening, I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, the water shimmering gold as the sun dipped. I would think about how close we came to losing it all, not just the property, but the principle. Emily hasn't been back since that day. Maybe she never will, and maybe that's for the best. I don't know if we will ever fix what has been broken, but I do know this. Once you set a boundary, it's the only thing that stands between what you value and those who would take it. One evening, as I locked the door and glanced one last time at the lake, the thought came to me with a clarity so sharp it felt like it had been waiting all along. I realized age is not about weakness. It's about dignity.